I want to make a quick video. I was reading a Facebook post earlier today, and literally someone was freaking out, as a lot of us do in our lawn care companies, when someone actually quits on a Monday morning as a no-call, no-show, and you find out the individual is never coming back to work for you. What do you do? Well, it got me thinking, holy crap, I've got an interesting life lesson here that I would like to share that happened in my lawn care company probably about 10 or 11 years ago. What happened is literally on the same exact experience this gentleman was having. I rolled into the shop with all intentions of getting all the crews out. And literally, I think at that point we had probably 12 crews, 2-man mowing crews and some maintenance crews and fertilization. But literally, we didn't have enough bodies for 6 of the crews, approximately 5 or 6 crews. So basically a little more, a little less than 50% of our team didn't show that morning. So literally in a frantic, we started calling these individuals to see, like, A, if they were okay, and B, were they coming in? And a lot of them didn't answer their phones, but 1 or 2 of them actually did, and basically told us that they had basically quit and started their own, well, attempted to start their own lawn care and landscape company. So the point of the video here is we need to build some redundancy. So literally, when I lost about 50% of our staff that day, I went into panic mode and literally jumped on one of the mowing crews in some crazy, wild idea, thinking that I would actually be able to cover the production of 5 or 6 crews, which obviously, looking back at it, is complete insanity. But such a whirlwind, such a devastating thing to lose about half of your team and literally have them go out and try to start a competing company with you. And to come to find out they're actually starting to steal some of your clients. A lot of times when we're in the trenches of the war of our service business, we don't actually have a clear mind of what we should be doing. So kind of responding to the gentleman that lost 1 employee, thankfully he didn't lose half his team for the maintenance division. What I should have done, looking at it in retrospect, is gone right back to the office, got the 5 or 6 crews that were left out, had them tag team at the end of the day to just start chunking away at the additional work if they could, incur the overtime. That would have been fine, and rally the troops around that. But really, what I did is I jumped out on a truck thinking I was going to cover that gap, which obviously didn't happen. So I should have went back to that office and started working that database of potential new hires that we had previously interviewed. I should have ran some Facebook ads, should have put basically a 1-day recruiting and hiring session together and tried to actually fill that gap. Now, yes, some of the clients may have been aggravated, the key commercial HOAs and other places like that. Yes, we'd obviously prioritize those. But I think if through some communication, I think we could have worked a 7-day week that week and maybe the next week and covered a lot of that gap. But what I did is actually going back on that truck, I prolonged the pain of it and didn't allow the company to respond the way it should. So what we need to be doing proactively to beat this really is to go out and constantly recruit. And to that day moving forward, we have always gone out in that lawn care company and interviewed every Monday, Wednesday, and sometimes Friday. And what we found in the Northeast and upstate New York is traditionally over the last 10 or 11 years we had looked at it, we would always lose 1 or 2 employees. Either they would get fired or we'd have to let them go. But there remain things right before, within a week before, after Memorial Day, and within a week before, after the July 4th weekend or holiday. And then right around the 2nd or 3rd week of August, which ends up being my birthday, August 18th. But that week before or after, we would consistently lose guys or girls. And then right before the fall cleanup season going into November, it just around those holidays, whatever it is, that traditionally we knew we were going to lose people, whether they just got burned out and they weren't a good fit anymore, or people would just quit and no show. So we knew around those 3 or 4 times throughout the year that we would ramp up the recruiting even more. And that's when we would kick in the Friday recruiting. So if you're looking at this, you've lost some employees, hopefully you haven't lost half your team. The desire or the first interest is to go out and jump on that truck. But really, that's the worst thing you can do in my experience. And I've made that mistake more than a few times that I like to admit. But every time that we've actually gone back to the basics and said, you know what, let's get the initial team to cover that, and maybe shift a guy from the fertilizing crew over to the maintenance crew for a day just to cover the gap. Obviously a higher expense, but we can shift some fertilizing around. We got creative while we covered that gap. But the way that we solved that right out the gate, the most successful, was to go right back to the office, start working the database. And if you don't have a database, we need to start interviewing Monday, Wednesday, and sometimes Friday, because when we need the employee, it's too late. We need to have an active database segmented, in my opinion, rated in A, B, and C fashion, with or without a driver's license. And then we can pull from that database. And if you end up losing half your staff, really, you want to go out and you want to have a hiring basically event, pump it out, give it 2-3 days notice, and then literally go in, interview everybody. Anybody who made the cut, have them come back for the second interview about halfway through the day. And then at the end of the day, you actually have job contracts and offers there, and you actually sign it on the spot. And that's how you would actually do that, because we did that in the spring many a times to hire when we grew the company, literally doubling in size some years. How did you go out and actually staff that? Well, we actually went out and had hiring events live. Well, there's nothing really stopping you doing that in the spring or on a given Wednesday or Thursday after you lose half your team on a Monday. But what I'm going to suggest and really talk about here is you don't ever want to go in and fill that gap unless you absolutely have to by physically jumping on the truck. Now, if you're still on the truck, nothing wrong with that. Like, that's a different story. But even if you're on your truck and you lose your helper, you definitely want to take a half a day to a day and just work on the business and not in it to fill that gap, because you can physically not keep up the work of 2 people by yourself. You may be able to do it in the short term. But like I said, I'd rather see you work a half day or full day on a Saturday or even a Sunday to cover that gap, but push the work off and work on the actual issue at hand and go out and staff for it. So main video today is I saw a gentleman who lost his one employee. Thank God he didn't lose half of his employees like we did one time when they went out to go start their own company. Now, you're probably wondering what happened to those 5 or 6 guys that went out to try to start their own company, or actually 10 to 12 guys based on the 5 or 6 crews. We systematically wiped them clear and basically put them out of business where they started, and circled back to the clients that they had taken and recovered 99% of them. So they stayed in business for about maybe 2 weeks, if that. But we took care of that as well. I mean, that's obviously something I would not take lightly, and obviously I didn't. But the main point of the video is, listen, if you're losing an employee, don't get on that truck, especially if you're not on the truck normally. Go out and do what the business owner is supposed to do. Set the vision, set the strategy, and this is the strategy. We need to go out and hire and recruit constantly, Monday, Wednesday, sometimes Friday. And if you look in your business, you're probably going to see that Memorial Day, 4th of July, middle of August, and right before fall cleanups, if you're in the Northeast area. Those consistently happened in the business. We would always lose somebody or we'd let somebody go. And those seem to be the burnout points, or maybe people are shifting jobs going into the winter when that happens in November. Whatever the case may be, if you can find a historical trend, that's when you start recruiting that 3rd day on the week. So Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or Monday, Wednesday. Build that database, segment them, and now when you need an employee, you've got a qualified list to start working. Man, if I had that list when we had lost all those guys and girls, it could have probably spent a half a day working that list, and on Tuesday morning, we would have been back up and running. But no, I let the insanity run for almost a month and just about killed myself mentally and physically. And it did take a toll on the family and not being able to go. And I remember that one day, I had to work 3/4 a day on Mother's Day just to literally get caught up when I was still in the truck with those guys. And then the light came on later that day that, you know, let's just wait a day or two. Let's go out, let's recruit and fill that bottleneck of employees. And within a few days, we had it. Now, they may not have been the best employees. They may not have been the best fit, but to get through that short area, we overhired, and then we literally kind of had a tryout for the best employees. And those actually, a couple of the guys that came out of that were some of the best employees we had right up to the end. So that's it. Aaron's got a quick question here I might answer as well. Are you always paying for recruiting job boards, Facebook jobs posts to keep the list fresh? Aaron, yes, that's exactly what I'm talking about. So we need to be running those ads. We need to be doing referrals for current employees, referring their friends and family in for jobs. We had a bunch of guys from Guatemala that we brought in H-2B visas. They went to a particular church on Sundays, and we would drive the guys every Sunday to church. And that was some of our best referral, because those guys loved us, and they would get $250 every time they referred somebody from the church who would work for us. You got to figure out where's your best employee hanging out and go to that place. There was also a trailer park that I had probably 70% of my employees at one point were living in. So we actually went out and targeted that trailer park for job ads. So you got to figure out where that demographic, your perfect employee, is kind of living or hanging out. And every week we need to invest money into the Facebook, the job boards, all the things you're talking about, as well as organically going out and trying to find some people, local Dunkin' Donuts or things like that. You're going through the drive-through. We had one gentleman that was just a standout. So we literally, had a good relationship with him because I was getting a coffee every morning, and literally I threw him a card and said, hey man, if you're ever looking to make a change, hit us up. Guy hit me up 6 months later, and he joined the team. So look at those different areas, because if you've got cooks or waiters, things like that, in the back of those kitchens, several hundred degrees at some points in summer, those are the folks that are going to be able to survive outside doing landscape maintenance, and maybe they want to get out and just get some fresh air. So we need to be creative, especially now in the tight labor market. But as soon as we stop looking for future employees is when we get in trouble. So we've got to be looking. And if it hits the proverbial fan and you lose 1 or 2 employees over a weekend, don't jump back on the truck. Take a day, reset, and start focusing your recruiting, because that will pay big dividends in the long end. And maybe we got to pay a little extra overtime or work an extra day on the weekend. The team will survive, and so will the business in a lot better way if we go out and just try to fix that right off the gate. Aaron says, other sources for employees besides Indeed, Facebook, and referrals. Aaron, depending on right now, sometimes like a local Craigslist ad will actually be pretty good. We got to be creative. A lot of times actually putting like a yard sign in front of a Lowe's or Home Depot on the exit. If it's in a plaza, you can get away with that usually. Sometimes they take them down. You got to put them back up. Or if you're like a Site One or Ewing's, things like that, putting some signs where those guys are driving by, that worked well for us as well. Like a Site One or Ewing's, a lot of those working out or out cards, if you ask them nicely, because those are where you're potentially trained employees are living. We got to be creative right now. But those yard signs outside of Lowe's or Home Depot near the exit, if you can get them out there, especially when you're doing that live hiring event, that's a great idea. I've seen some great results out of that as well. So love the comments, love the questions, Aaron. Hopefully you're not in this scenario that I was in. But if you're out there and you lose an employee this week, don't have the temptation of jumping in that truck immediately. Go out and dial into hopefully that database that you've created for hiring. And if you haven't, that's your action plan this week. Go out and start recruiting for every position. And if you're saying, hey, Mike, I'm still in the truck, I don't have time to do that, block out an extra 15 to 20 minutes during your lunch hour twice a week, which you can do. I don't care if you're at Mickey D's or pizza joint, or just eating your bagged lunch on the side of the road in a parking lot. Take an extra 15 minutes twice a week and start working those over the phone interviews and start recruiting, because we need to do that. Whether we're a one-man show or two-man show or a $15 to $20 million company, this is what breeds success. But remember, when you lose those employees, fight the temptation of getting on that truck. I'd rather see you a half a day or a full day behind, but then have that team coming in, and hopefully you've got them covering the tail end of the week to get you caught up. So comments, questions, drop them below. Callahan's Corner. You ask the questions, we answer them live or right here on Facebook.